Well, a few years ago, I wrote a little white paper for my government, and it was about using Twitter and Facebook and other social media for public diplomacy and for diplomacy in general. Somebody at the foreign ministry saw it and said, well, why don't you publish it? And that book became Twitter for Diplomats. We published it in 2013, in February that year. It was prefaced by the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs back then, Giorgio Terzi, who used to be ambassador here to the UN and ambassador of Italy to Washington. And it became maybe one of the first few sort of books and white paper on how to use social media for diplomacy. Since that book came out, we actually put it out for free. So if anybody's interested, you can just go online, Google Twitter for Diplomats, and you can download it for free. It was published by the Diplo Foundation, which is an organization that trains diplomats in Europe. Since the book came out, I sort of decided to sit down with people that are working with social media, first of all in governments, then in international organizations, and then sort of going sort of outside of government and see how, for example, websites, news websites use social media and internet in general. And from those conversations, we're talking about Alec Ross, or who used to be the advisor for innovation to Hillary Clinton, Anne-Marie Slaughter, who used to be the director of policy planning at the State Department. She's now at the New America Foundation. Other people in government, the former Italian, US ambassador to Rome. From those conversations, I sort of decided, well, technology and social media is just a way to open up diplomacy to the public. But it's all about ideas, and it's all about innovation. So the idea of the book, part of the book, was also to define what innovation is and how we can apply innovation into a government environment. So first of all, the let's say definition of innovation. So I talked to people that are considered big innovators, like Giorgio at MIT in Boston, and to sort of define what innovation is. And basically, it comes down to three sort of elements. The first one is ideas. So if you want to be an innovator, you do have to invest in ideas, no matter if they're related to technology or not, to the digital era or not. Second of all, to be an innovator or to be innovative, you have to be a disruptor. So you have to sort of have an idea to change the system, and so that that system, that organization can move forward. And the third idea is about failures. You have to implement a system where failures are taken into consideration, not where you avoid failures at all. And when you put that into a government environment, no matter if it's the US, if it's a multilateral organization, or Italy, or anywhere else, it becomes a little bit hard to think about investing in ideas, to think about disrupting a system, and to think about implementing failures into your own bureaucracy. So from that, from that definition, I sort of talk to people and ask them, like, so how do we can implement innovation and the digital era into our own systems? And different ideas came out. And first of all, it's when you are an innovator, when you want to be an innovator, you sort of have to have different hats. So if you're in government, you're not only a bureaucrat, a diplomat, a government official, but you have to also be somewhat creative to create content that can be engaging. You have to be somewhat sort of an architect, an artist, you can be a poet, and if you put all those hats together, you can really try to sort of innovate your system and move forward. I remember talking to one of the different people that I interviewed for the book, and his idea was like, often we, when we think about ideas, we always like keep our people in our own little system, and we don't think outside the box. We don't take people from outside our government. We don't take people that are in different other fields to sort of get new ideas and brainstorm those ideas. So it was suggesting, for instance, to bring a author, or to bring a painter, or a musician. And truly, those people are not related to foreign policy at all. They're not related to diplomacy, but why not? They can have ideas that can help you help your message and that can help you sort of move forward. Technology is still a big part, so you have to first understand technology and to sort of like not be afraid of technology, because sometimes that's one of the main issues. And failures are very important. If you're scared about failures, if you think that the goal is to sort of try to not incur any failure, then you're not going to be. It's quite impossible that you can actually be or become an innovator, innovate your system. So I don't want to take too much time, because I hope like people have questions about how to use social media and what social media and how social media are changing sort of the way that diplomacy is done today. But I sort of like to conclude with the words of Joito at MIT. And one thing that he said, and I think it's like very important, is that if you want to do something important in your life, you don't have to think only about your little box, but you have to sort of like, your goal has to be something magical. He calls it serendipity. You have to sort of reach that serendipity, and when you know that you're creating something that is more than just your own little job, then you can really create a magical message that can become viral, that can help people, and that can actually help us sort of move forward in terms of challenges that we have today in our world.
Thank you. Stefan.
Great, thank you, Andreas. Congratulations on the book. I'm always in awe of people who actually write books, who go through, have an idea, go through and publish it. So congratulations. You know, I think in terms of the UN and social media, I think you'll hear from both Debbie and myself. There's so much. There's so much to say in the way we use it, how we use it, who uses it. But I think overall, and thinking about what was said in the Security Council this morning about the charter, it enabled. I think the wonderful thing about social media, it enables us to focus more on we the peoples than the member states. It's the communications tool that I think that is necessary, that in a sense we've been waiting for, to communicate directly with people. And that creates an inherent tension with a member state organization. There have been a number of times when the UN has launched social media campaigns, and I mean the UN writ large, not the Secretariat, but the agencies and the ones who run bigger campaigns, who have been accused of going over the heads of member states in trying to influence their public, which in itself is it's a valid criticism, and it's a valid discussion point. But I think overall that's the real strength of social media for the UN. We use it for communications purposes, obviously to put out information. We use it on development issues. We have a program like the Global Pulse, which looks at big data and uses and social media for development purposes. We use it in emergency relief situations. We help governments prepare for emergency preparedness through the use of social media. So it has a big varied use for us. And in terms of communications, it's a force multiplier. It enables just about everyone in the UN, top down, to communicate. Whether you are someone like Jamal Ben Omar, the Special Envoy on Yemen, who basically communicates through Facebook. When he has an announcement, he posts it on Facebook, and much to my, personally, sometimes to my frustration, because I don't have anything on at the briefing on what he's doing. That's why I often refer you to his Facebook page, because that seems to be more up to date. To any staff member who communicates within their own circle of friends, whether you have 20 friends, whether you have 100 friends or 800 friends on Facebook. It helps to humanize the UN, and it helps to the transparency. Now the challenge, I think, for us is not so much for being innovators, because we do try to be innovators, but I think for a top-down kind of 1950s style bureaucracy, risk-taking at this point is more important than innovating. And I think all of us who manage social media campaigns have really pushed our colleagues to be risk-takers. And that's hard in this culture. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't, but to encourage your staff members to try new things and risk failure, because whatever we do, we're doing it for the first time. And unless you're willing to act and to accept a failure, you're not going to get very far. And again, that's a challenge within the UN context. I like to talk, but I'll stop in a few seconds. The other thing I think we have to concern ourselves about is, I would argue, I think, Andreas, you write in your introduction, you talk about the democratization of diplomacy. But I think we have to worry about the digital divide, because it's not really, I don't think it's the democratization, it's the opening of diplomacy. And it often, it does sometimes create a space where the loudest wins. And we have to, on the one hand, push to close the digital divide, but also figure out ways to measure the quality of the voices that we hear in the feedback loop, as opposed to the quantity of the voices. Okay, I'll stop.